think about the town that you grew up in or the town that you're living in now and measure it in terms of its energy and excitement and vitality compared to maybe 20 years ago. Is your town doing okay? Or is it experiencing what John Paget calls slow motion disaster, which is a concern of his, and his documentary film career has been focusing on a lifelong fascination of cities and towns across the US that are experiencing a decline, and some of them are becoming ghost towns. Today we're going to talk about what causes a town to go down. What causes it? Is it layoffs? Is it a change of industry? Is it urban sprawl? Did COVID kick it down? John believes that no matter what's happening to your town, if you pay attention and find out its great civic story, you can save your town from demise. I remember Ocean Grove and Asbury Park when I was growing up. They really started going down. And then Sandy hit. Oh my God. But then someone like Bruce Springsteen was able to give attention to Asbury Park and bring interest and money, and it revitalized. And you can go there now, and it's just a great place to be, but it didn't happen by accident. It happened because somebody took interest. John is that guy, and he's taken interest in a few towns, specifically the history of Buffalo, New York. And he talks about this idea of sparking revitalization by sort of invigorating people's interest in their town. But it's not something that happens overnight. So we're going to talk about this. John, thank you so much for being on Swell. I think your focus on how towns become ghost towns is so fascinating. It's sad. It's hopeful. It's everything. It's why you're such a good filmmaker, because you understand that the human experience can be such a beautiful, roller coaster. And you take us on that ride so beautifully. Can you tell us what drew you ultimately to this expertise of focusing on towns and how they become revitalized because of the resilience of community members and of civic pride? When did you start looking at this? And what was your first inkling that you could make a connection between this experience and filmmaking?
Well, hi, Deborah, and thank you for the conversation. You know, it all started for me right out of college. I did a series of documentaries on Route 66, the famous highway that goes from Chicago to LA. And the interesting thing about Route 66 is that it wound its way through the heart of every little small town and village along the path. So unlike the freeways of today, which bypass the cities, they designed the original road, this historic road, to go right through the town square or the city center. And when the freeways came and replaced Route 66, the commercial traffic and business for a lot of these towns dried up. And so as I made my way from Chicago to LA, I saw so many of these charming small towns and villages across America, and I saw how they were struggling. Some of them were barely hanging on. Some were complete ghost towns. And it was kind of heartbreaking. And I started wondering and thinking about the reasons for why these towns were declining. And meanwhile, sometimes just a mile or two away at the freeway interchange, the parking lots were packed at the McDonald's and the Motel 6 and the muffler shop. So that really got me thinking about this. But another thing is that I noticed that there were a few towns along the way that had managed to, against all odds, stage a comeback. And they seemed to have one thing in common, which is that the community knew its history and its civic story, and they were united around that, and they embraced that, and it gave them an optimistic vision for how they could meet the challenges they were facing and build a future together. And so that was something I keyed in on Route 66. And then later, as you said, I moved to Buffalo, New York And I kind of call Buffalo the ultimate underdog city, a classic Rust Belt city, the poster child of post-industrial America. I call it the George McFly of cities because it was the city walking around with a kick me sign on its back. And my experience there in making some short films really proved the concept that if a community can see its story and experience its story together, it can change the conversation, it can change the outlook and attitude of a city, and a city can sort of put away a negative self-image and put away apathy and kind of be emboldened to face the future.
John, it's so nice to hear your voice. Thank you for coming on to Swell. Excuse my delay. I'm overseas, so I'm just getting to this wonderful conversation that we're in. And I just, again, want to thank you for the work you do and for the precedent you set about storytelling as a way to obviously bring people together and understand the population itself in a city and where they're coming from, as opposed to coming in and just imposing a view of it. Like, I feel like you're embedded and you respect so much the fabric of the culture that's in that city. That's the only way to tell a story, is to be respectful of whose story you're telling. And that's the beauty of great documentation, is documentary work, is not imposing an idea of what it's going to be or the ending, but being a part of that group. And that's something I wanted to ask you about. I guess I could talk about Buffalo, but in general, I sort of want a general answer from you about this. Because you specialize in this very profound niche of telling the story of cities, do you find yourself attracted to cities that are in the downslope or in the upslope? And do you look for an arc of a story before you go in there? And when do you decide a place is going to be a story? What markers are you looking for from an artistic point of view, from a storytelling point of view, from a journalistic point of view? And how do you keep yourself out of the results? I know that's a question that every documentarian is asked, but specific, if you're living in Buffalo, it's, you're part of that world. But is there a recipe you have or a checklist that helps you understand whether or not this is a good story to tell, and how do you stay away from becoming enmeshed in it? And sometimes the story doesn't end the way you want it to, and I just want to talk a little bit about that with you. So feel free to riff on all these questions, but I think it's really fascinating. Those of us who don't make films don't understand how you approach and at what point you enter the story.
Wow, those are all great questions, Deborah. I think the best stories for us are cities or towns that are currently engaged in the struggle, right? They're trying to revitalize, or they're trying to stage a comeback. The best stories are ones with a real oscillating narrative, with a rise and a fall, or perhaps many peaks and valleys in the trajectory of their town. But that's always what makes a good story. And I think we're doing filmmaking and storytelling with a purpose. We want to build community. We want to spur revitalization. In that sense, we're actually not totally objective like a journalist would be. We're an advocate. We're rooting for that town and trying to tell a story that will serve that purpose. So I think what we do is try to find a town that is in the beginning stages or has some early seeds of a revitalization happening, and try to highlight those and spotlight those so the community can see, hey, there's hope. There's a history in this town of doing great things in the past, and we can do great things again. I think that one of our strategies for keeping ourselves out of the story too much and making sure it's an authentic story of their own town is that we never write a word of narration. At least in 99% of the films we do, there's no script per se or written narration or voiceover. we craft the story entirely from the words of the interviewees that we do with the local people. So it really becomes their story told in their own words. And I think that brings the authenticity to it. We are typically outsiders. Even in Buffalo, where I lived, I didn't grow up in Buffalo. And I did some, I think, of my best filmmaking and storytelling in Buffalo in my first years there, because it takes fresh eyes sometimes. It takes that outside perspective. And so, yes, you have to be deeply immersed and do your research to understand a place. But it does help to have that outside perspective. And we've found that over and over again.
Hey, John, it makes so much sense when you talk about trying to keep the narrative from the subject's perspective and not from some written script, of course. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, the ones that are most powerful, the ones that are just kind of, they don't have to be verite, but they really, you feel like you're there, and but you trust the hand of the director completely, and you know there'll be an arc. For people listening, and I'm sure some new voices will come in, but this is my question I want to leave you with, which is for people who are in towns that are part of an arc of resurrection, if you call it that, or demise, or whatever part of the curve they're on, and they want to tell their story through film. What advice would you give them in terms of starting that process? And in fact, if someone wanted to reach out to you, what's the protocol?
The advice I would give to someone interested in doing a film and telling the civic story of their town, probably first off, is find a team or build or recruit a team of friends and collaborators who want to do that with you, even if it's a couple or 3 people, because film can be an ambitious endeavor. And the second thing is find your characters. And here I'm talking about your heroes. The person who is working today, perhaps they're an entrepreneur, they're opening a business or remodeling, restoring a building in a part of town that everyone else has given up on, or maybe it's a preservationist that's fighting to save a historic building. You know, find your characters and heroes and start chronicling them, and then build out the larger history of the town around that. But maybe find, like I said, a hero of today and follow their story and use that as kind of a storyline to get you into the story. And yeah, everyone is welcome to reach out to me and our team. We work on commission, so we go to towns and are hired to do projects, but we're also willing to just hear about what you're doing and give what advice we can. And you can reach out to us via email. My email is john@firstmainfilms.com. You can find us online at firstandmainfilms.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn just by searching my name, John Paget. So I'd love to hear what people are dreaming of and thinking of doing. If we can help in any way, that's even better. So thank you, and I hope there's a few more questions, and happy to talk about this more. Thanks.
John, thank you so much for your generosity here. I hope more people can tell the stories of their town. I think it's an extraordinary journey to be on when you're living in a place that you've seen ebbs and flows and ups and downs. And you're right, character is everything. Finding the person that really epitomizes who this town is and what they are, I think that's just such a critical thing. So I love that advice, and we'll look for more questions here. And your voice here is extraordinary. So please don't hesitate to give us updates on the projects you're working on. You can create a news swell for that, and we're here to listen. So thank you so much.